Good afternoon, Mr. Ingram. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks so much for having me.
Go ahead, you have 10 minutes for this presentation.
Perfect. And happy Valentine's Day to all of you, and happy Valentine's Day to my girlfriend Heather that otherwise would have been here, but she just worked an overnight shift at Seven Oaks Urgent Care, so she has a reason to not be here.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you.
So I come here today not just as a resident of Seven Oaks. Heather and I bought our first house last summer in the area, not far from Marymound, but as someone who cares deeply about the history of the area and the many historic buildings that it houses. As Councillor Eadie alluded to earlier, my family has deep roots in the area. My grandpa's family was the Calhouns, my grandma's the Sutherlands, they're both from Scotland, and my grandma's family, the Sutherlands, was among the first Scottish settlers to call the area west of the Red River home, and you can see that name when you go down the Chief Peguis Trail. And I'd like to read an excerpt of a note that I sent to both councillors who voted against keeping the historical designation about a week and a half ago. I invite you to have a walk in my neighborhood of Scotia Heights. I'll point out buildings over 100 years old, the unique architectural features of each, and the many stories that each one holds. And then I'll remind you of one thing. Once they're demolished, they can't be rebuilt. The ability to walk by them on a daily basis and admire them for how unique they are is gone. And the hard work of dozens, if not hundreds, of people that worked on each of them is just forgotten. And so I invite you to West Kildonan, and I hope that you can appreciate the history and the connection that many people have to this area through the few historic buildings of this magnitude we have remaining. And I never heard back from either, but the offer still stands, and for anyone on council right now. I mean, I could probably give a historical walking tour with my eyes closed at this point. Over the last year, and especially after I moved to the neighborhood, I really began to have a deeper understanding and appreciation to the local history that the area has. And I was especially moved after I visited the Seven Oaks House Museum. It's a building over 170 years old. And being able to see what life was like during that time period and the unique way that history can be recounted when you're quite literally standing in the same building as those historical figures were. While I was there, I learned that the building spent decades upon decades of being derelict. While it was looted, it was abused, it was left to wither. But even after all that, and through the effort and care of historians, hobbyists, and many, many volunteers, the building was able to be restored and into a museum and an artifact of what life was like and how a home of that stature would have been constructed and modeled all those years ago. And that was because in all of those years, while it was abused and it was allowed to decay, it still wasn't torn down. I see many parallels between the two, the Seven Oaks House and the Leacock House. Because while the Seven Oaks House was the oldest house in Winnipeg, the Leacock House is among the oldest examples still around of the Queen Anne revival style of architecture. And for reference, that makes it 13 years older than the Delnavert Museum and 30 years older than the Macbeth House, just a few minutes north. And it's only a couple decades older than the Seven Oaks House itself. And yet it seems like this perspective is lost, because there really are so few buildings like this that we have left. But then again, age is just one factor that we have when considering the historical significance of a building like this. So I alluded to the fact that this house is in the Queen Anne revival style. It's a style that was most popular in the prairies in this area between 1890 and 1910, 1914, the 19-teens. But that's what makes 442 Scotia, built in 1882, such a rarity. Things like the bay windows, the wraparound porch, the asymmetrical facade, they are all what contribute to making this building unique. And again, that's just what we can see from the outside. I hear the inside is even cooler. I want to underline the fact that residents as a whole support the great work that Marymound does. And it's important that residents support the expansion, modernization of its facilities. But I believe that we can both support new initiatives for the organization while also believing that a building like 442 Scotia should be preserved for the history it contains and, frankly, for the museum that it should be. I'd like to conclude by asking what this current City Council in 2023 would like its legacy to be, and whether or not prioritizing Winnipeg's earliest history is going to be a priority to them. Regardless of whether you're from North Kildonan, St. Vital, River Heights, or St. Boniface, we all have history here, and we all have a responsibility to preserve the few examples of it we have left in the physical form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ingram, for your presentation. Appreciate that.